Hey Dino, so this in our first series of quick questions with Dino, something interesting that comes up all the time from either new customers or existing customers, it's when they get surprised of why we're selling or even they're selling brake products for electric vehicles. For example, with new prospects, when they finally come on board and we're setting up the initial inventory, they realize that we're suggesting them to stock, for example, brake pads and rotors for Teslas. Or for existing customers, when they're going through the inventory or we're reviewing, we're reviewing their inventory management with them, they get taken aback as to how many Tesla pads and rotors they sold. Can you tell us why that is? If electric vehicles have regenerative braking, why is it that we're selling so many brake pads and rotors for electric vehicles?
Well, it's not just relegated to the Teslas. You could also lump hybrid vehicles too. Obviously, the most prominent one out there is the Prius, right? That's kind of the one that, I don't know if it started it all, but certainly popularized the whole drive towards hybrids and then EVs. These cars also have regenerative braking. And I'm going to start with the Toyota, if I could, and then I'll get to the Tesla. But one thing that needs to be understood, because we sell a lot of Prius brakes as well, and I think everyone does. Yes, there's a lot of them out there, and the brakes do last a significant amount of time. But the reality is, the engineers, when designing that vehicle, okay, they will apply the size and diameter and mass of brake for the vehicle as it needs it. So in the case of the Prius, it pretty much has the same chassis as a Toyota Yaris, okay? Except the Prius is about 1,000 pounds heavier, okay? But it has the exact same size brake system. So they try to do that at the engineering level because, of course, they want to employ fewer materials, lower costs, things like that, wherever they can. Because they figure in this case, well, the car has regenerative braking, so it doesn't need as much brake. So yes, the vehicles don't use as much brake as they typically, as a normal vehicle would, but there's a lot more mass in the car. In this case, same exact car, 1,000 pounds heavier. Basically, that's just the battery weight. So it's doing quite a bit of work when it's not using the regenerative system. And typically when it doesn't use that system is when you're going at higher speeds, because at a certain point, if the regeneration system heats up too much, then it reverts to the standard brake system, okay? And that's when the wear really increases. Now moving to the Tesla, it's a little bit of a different dynamic there, but similar in that you've got a vehicle. Let's take the Tesla Model S. That's a vehicle that weighs pretty close to 5,000 pounds. Now that's, looking at it, you'd say, well, that car should weigh no more than 3,500 pounds. Any car that size pretty much weighs that amount. But again, it's got well over 1,000 pounds just of batteries. So you've got a lot of mass there. And yes, the regenerative braking is a key function of the vehicle, but the size of the brake system, okay, so the Tesla does have a large diameter brake disc, I would say, but there's not a lot of mass in there because there doesn't need to be, right? Because driving around town, you're pretty much using the regenerative braking and only using the brakes at the final stop, right? So, so that's the reason why you might, they don't use the brakes. They do use the brakes. But there's another key thing, especially, and I think uniquely associated with the Tesla. And this is just something I've observed. There's no technical paper on it, but just from people that I know and from what I see just driving around, everybody hot rods those things. Certainly the people I know do, and these aren't hot rodders, but who wouldn't get giddy in a vehicle that goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds? Well, when you go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, you also have to stop, right? So I think there's an inordinate amount of wear in those vehicles because honestly, just from what I've seen, a lot of people hot rod. The other issue is the Model S hasn't changed brakes basically since it's come out. So you've got what, 8, 9 years, 10 years of the same vehicle with the same brakes. So now there's a lot in operation. Some are getting a bit long in tooth, and they need their brakes replaced, and it's always the same part number. So I think they came out, what, 2011 or something, and 2021 they're still using the same brakes. So the other thing is that, and this is something that this is a characteristic of all electric vehicles, in that they operate quiet, right? So typically for example, the SAE 2521 noise test doesn't even measure noise until it hits above a 70 dB threshold. Well, Teslas operate below that threshold. I mean, you could be walking down the street, you can't even hear them pull up. So, so what happens is they have to be super quiet, but at the same time, right, the pads have to be very aggressive, because you may ask, well, why do they have to be so aggressive?
Yeah, why would they have to be so aggressive if they're, again, using the regenerative braking?
Well, because the vehicle stops so much of the time using the regenerative braking, they're not actually being used an awful lot, right? So the rotors on that car have a lot of chromium in them, and the chromium prevents the corrosion, and the aggressive pad aids in the elimination of the corrosion that could build up on the rotor. So this is a trait that's unique to those cars. Now, to counter what would be an aggressive pad going up to that rotor, and they could, with the potential of making noise, they use a very high carbon alloy.
Okay.
So the high carbon alloy, which is also known as dampened iron, helps reduce that noise that the rotor could make. But the collateral damage there is that it's softer, and the rotors will wear out quicker. So there's your why do they wear out quicker scenario. Two things: they have softer rotors, they have aggressive pads, and again, anecdotally, a lot of them are being hot rodded. So and they use basically the same part numbers for 10 years of production.
So if we can go back to that last comment, just to make sure I understand correctly, there's a lot of chromium in there, in the rotor, but the rotor is still rusting, right?
Still rust. It is cast iron. It's just got an extra degree of chromium in the rotor to help combat the corrosion issue, which is a trait of an electric vehicle with regenerative braking. Because again, you're not always stomping on the brakes. When you're always stomping on the brakes, you're cleaning the rotor constantly. That doesn't happen as much in an EV with regenerative braking, or even a hybrid.
So it's almost, or maybe it's somewhat of an appearance factor to clean the rust off of the rotors for that to do that.
It's appearance, but it's also performance, because you start having buildup of corrosion, and you're going to get pulsation, noise, and things like that.
Got it. Okay, fantastic. Well, I mean, that certainly explains why we're selling so many hybrid vehicle pads, but it seems to come up every time somebody glances over some data, and it pops up, and that question keeps coming up over and over again. So just wanted to answer that straight from your knowledge and your experience, and let everybody know what's going on.
Well, but I need to add to that. So when you do get those parts from us, we have in our premium offering a true direct replacement for that vehicle. So we do offer a high carbon chromium molybdenum alloy disc, okay, which is really what should be on there, as well as the proper abrasive brake pad that mates with that. So that's something that's when they do replace it with our 5000 series and our 900 pads and our 900 series rotors, you're going to get as close to as possible to what came off that vehicle to give it those same attributes as it did when it left the factory. Got it.
So in other words, you're saying they can keep hot rodding it just like they did when they took it off the dealer's lot?
Yeah, you might as well take advantage of all that power. Sure, why not? I would.
Got it. All right, Dino, well, thank you very much for that information. You're always such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure everybody will appreciate being a little smarter about their, the products that they have on their shelf. Appreciate the information.
Hey, you got it.